He wasn't born cruel. He was born into a house where cruelty was the family currency, and nobody ever asked if he wanted to spend it. Draco Malfoy walked into Harry Potter's story as the villain everyone loved to hate. Pale, sneering, always flanked by two boys built like furniture. But strip away the smirk and look at the timeline underneath it, and a very different picture appears. Not a monster. A kid handed a mask before he could even talk, and told it was his face. Let's start at the beginning, because that's where the mask gets built. Draco was born on June 5th, 1980, into the Malfoy family. Old wealth, old blood, and an old belief that blood was the only thing that mattered. His father, Lucius, was a Death Eater who'd bought his way out of Azkaban the first time around by claiming he'd been under the Imperius curse. His mother, Narcissa, came from the Black family, a bloodline so obsessed with purity they'd started burning relatives off the family tree for marrying the wrong people. That's the nursery Draco grew up in. Not warmth, not curiosity about the world. Doctrine. And here's the part that gets skipped in the Draco is just evil version of the story. He wasn't neglected. He was spoiled. Best broomsticks, best robes, anything money could buy. But underneath the gifts was a price tag nobody mentioned out loud. Approval. Lucius Malfoy didn't hand his son unconditional love. He handed him a standard. Be the best. Be superior. Never let a mudblood, a blood traitor, or a half-blood get ahead of you. Fail that standard, and the coldness that followed wasn't subtle. Therefore, by the time Draco was 11 years old, standing in Madame Malkin's getting fitted for his first Hogwarts robes, he already had the entire script memorized. He didn't write a word of it. He just knew his lines. That's the moment we meet him for the first time. Before Hogwarts, before the war, before any of it, a boy in a fitting room, talking to another boy he doesn't recognize, casually running down Hagrid as a sort of servant, casually assuming his new acquaintance's family and blood status matter more than his personality. He offers Harry Potter friendship on the condition that Harry reject Ron Weasley for being poor. Cold, transactional, exactly what he'd been trained to do. But watch closely, because the tell is right there in the first conversation. He's not testing Harry's character. He's testing Harry's usefulness. That's not cruelty for its own sake. That's a kid running the only social algorithm he was ever given. Harry says no, and Draco reacts like he's never heard the word before, because in his world, he probably hadn't. But here's where the story usually stops paying attention to Draco as a person and starts treating him as furniture. The guy Harry beats. Every book, a new insult, a new sneer, a new scheme that blows up in his face. Comic relief with a chip on his shoulder. Except the books are quietly doing something else the whole time, if you know where to look.
Because Draco Malfoy is one of the only characters in the entire series who is never rewarded for cruelty. Ever. Every single time he tries to be his father, every taunt, every scheme, every attempt to prove he's the superior wizard, it fails. Publicly, repeatedly. He loses to Harry on the Quidditch pitch. He loses in Dueling Club. His attempt to get Buckbeak executed backfires into years of resentment. His father's plan with the diary and Chamber of Secrets collapses and gets Lucius humiliated by Dumbledore in front of him. Over and over, the universe is quietly telling this kid, the ideology you were raised on doesn't actually work. And over, he doubles down anyway. Because doubling down is the only love language his family ever taught him. That's the tragedy sitting underneath the sneer. He's not choosing cruelty because he's winning. He's choosing it because it's the only currency he has. Then the fifth book happens and something shifts. Lucius Malfoy leads the Death Eaters into the Department of Mysteries, gets caught red-handed, and goes to Azkaban. Not the honorable, whispered about imprisonment his family had quietly survived before. Public, documented, a failure with his name stamped on it. And for a boy whose entire identity was built on his father's untouchable status, that's not just bad news. That's the floor dropping out. But Voldemort doesn't offer comfort. He offers punishment disguised as opportunity. In Draco's 6th year, he's marked, literally branded on the forearm, and given an impossible task: kill Albus Dumbledore, the most powerful wizard in Britain, to make up for his father's failure. 16 years old, no training as a killer, no real conviction, if we're honest, just fear and desperation, and a mother terrified he's going to die trying. Therefore, we get the single most important stretch of Draco's entire arc, and it's the part almost nobody talks about enough. The 6th book, where he disappears into the room of requirement for hours at a time, pale, shaking, skipping meals, crying in a bathroom where Harry finds him and nearly kills him with a curse he didn't understand. This is not a smug pureblood enjoying his power trip. This is a teenager falling apart in real time because he's been handed a murder to commit and no way out of it. And when the moment actually comes, when Draco finally has his wand raised at Dumbledore on the astronomy tower, the culmination of an entire year of pressure, he doesn't do it. He can't. Dumbledore, dying anyway, offers him an out, offers him protection. Draco hesitates so long that Snape has to step in and finish the job himself. That hesitation is the whole character in one frozen second. Everything he was raised to be says pull the trigger. Everything underneath that training says he's not built for this. The mask cracks, and for a moment you see the actual face behind it. But the war doesn't stop to let a 16-year-old figure out who he wants to be. It just keeps moving. And here's where the story does something almost nobody else in the series does with a former villain. It lets him become a bystander to his own life. In the 7th book, when Harry, Ron, and Hermione are dragged into Malfoy Manor, captured and disfigured beyond recognition by a stinging jinx, Draco is asked point blank by his own father, "Is this Harry Potter?" He knows. Anyone paying attention knows he knows. And he says he can't be sure. That single moment of manufactured uncertainty is arguably the most quietly heroic thing Draco Malfoy does in the entire series. And it costs him nothing in praise, because nobody in the room thanks him for it. His Aunt Bellatrix is inches away, ready to torture the truth out of anyone who slows her down. His parents are watching, and still he chooses the lie. Not out of love for Harry, out of something closer to exhaustion. A boy who has spent 2 years being ground down by a war he never wanted, finally choosing not to be the instrument of someone else's death. Compare that to the boy in Madame Malkin's, sizing up a stranger's usefulness before offering friendship. Same face, completely different person underneath it. Therefore, by the time the Battle of Hogwarts arrives, the story gives Draco one final, quiet test. In the heat of the fight, he's trapped in the room of requirement as Crabbe sets it on fire. Fiend fire, uncontrollable, consuming everything, and it's Harry Potter, the boy he spent 7 years tormenting, who circles back through the flames to save him. Not because Draco earned it through some grand redemptive act, because Harry, even now, refuses to let someone burn. That's the moment the mask finally comes all the way off, even if just for a second. Not because Draco becomes good, because Draco realizes, maybe for the first time in his life, that the people who were supposed to be his enemies were never as cruel as the people who raised him. And here's the part J.K. Rowling adds almost as an afterthought. Years later, in the epilogue, the detail that quietly recontextualizes his entire arc. 19 years after the war, Draco Malfoy is standing on platform 9 3/4, sending his own son Scorpius off to Hogwarts. And when their eyes meet across the platform, Harry and Draco share a small nod. Not friendship, not forgiveness spoken out loud. Just two men who survived the same war from opposite sides, quietly acknowledging that the child standing next to them doesn't have to inherit what they did. That's the whole story, compressed into one silent nod. Draco spent his childhood being handed a mask he never chose. Blood purity, superiority, cruelty as currency, and spent the rest of the series slowly, painfully, prying it off his own face, one failed scheme and one impossible choice at a time. He never gets a triumphant redemption arc. No speech, no medal, no moment where the crowd cheers for him. Just small refusals, a lie to his father, a hesitation on a tower, a nod on a train platform 19 years later, to the boy he used to hate. He wasn't born behind that mask. Somebody put it there. And piece by piece, choice by choice, he's the one who finally took it off. If you want to keep unpacking characters like this, the ones the story paints as villains but never actually lets off the hook that easily, come hang out in the Avenzo. It's built for people who like digging past. Subscribe Avenzo, hit a like, and press the bell icon.